Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. Despite this famous tagline, we are seeing aggression on LAC. This is happening for the first time after 1977. What is the reason behind this? What is the reason behind the recent skirmishes in Galwan Valley? Is there much more than what meets the eye? Is it because India has become a prominent nuclear nation? Or is it because India is reclaiming its land to carry out infrastructural activities? To understand more on this, a seminar was organized on Tuesday, 3rd March 2020 on India-China relations in 21st century, challenges and opportunity. It was organized by Center for Advanced Strategic Studies, Center for China Analysis and Strategy, in association with India Council of World Affairs and Maharashtra Education Society, Pune. This seminar was also organized to commemorate the 160th year of Maharashtra Education Society. It was held at MES Auditorium, Pune. Commander Arnab Das, retired, shared his opinion during the seminar.
Once again, thank you, Bhushan Gokhale sir, for this opportunity. I'm going to cover a little different perspective. I've been working on this concept called the Underwater Domain Awareness Framework, and I have something to discuss on that and try to build that into the perspective of Indo-China relation. I recently, when the President Trump's visit was there, I tried to work on that aspect. I have some publications on that, but today we'll focus on the Indo-China perspective. So we'll try and cover it under these heads. So 21st century, it's a new global order. There is a whole lot of things happening. There's a lot of churn happening. And I think we need to look at it in a very, very different perspective. I mean, Indian Ocean region is gaining a whole lot of strategic relevance, and we need to focus. And even when we talk about Indo-Pacific, India must not forget the Indo part of it. I mean, the capacity building is something we just have no escape. But I see there is a tremendous gap in that, and that's what I would try to convince the audience. So, I mean, this is a very unique area today. I mean, globally, the different regions have attained strategic relevance, but today, in the 21st century, I think Indian Ocean region is most important. Particularly, energy flowing from the Middle East to the economies on the other side, and also the finished goods coming back and the raw material going from Africa and the other side. So economically, it's a very, very important thing. So economy obviously builds the military or the strategic relevance. The second part is politically. I mean, Indian Ocean region is extremely volatile, so non-state actors equally participate in this whole process, so security concerns are there. So if you have to protect your economic interests, you need to take care of this. And because this is strategically important, extra-regional powers are here, and because there is no unity among the powers or the nations in this region, it's easy for extra-regional powers to kind of play their games. And military interventions have become a norm. Submarine operation on the underwater operation is something we need to be very, very focused. I mean, now I think recently the government has taken a decision that no more aircraft carrier, but we need to understand this in a very, very, so underwater domain awareness obviously takes center stage. I will talk about this, hardware versus software. When we talk about trade, I mean, I wrote this piece when President Trump was here. These nations will obviously push for hardware. But we have to understand our unique characteristics, and without the soft capability of making that hardware work, we are actually wasting money. We are buying, they will obviously push, but they will never let you develop those capabilities. And today we are talking about, when we talk about underwater, we are talking about acoustic capacity building. I'll try and talk about this more. Now, extra-regional powers, the China factor, there's more and more Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean region. So the countermeasure, the US and other forces are here, but we have really not been able to build up capability. So there is a conflict zone in our own backyard. Now, internationally, It's very well, this is the point about red line and the rat line. It was a paper by the British intelligence on the Syria conflict. The chemical weapon usage, I mean, that was a red line the Americans had drawn, that if you use chemical weapons, we'll come down heavily on you. But the chemical attack, I mean, chemical weapon capability is not something very simple. It has to, so Al-Nusra is the only group which has got chemical weapon capability in that region. And what is Al-Nusra? Al-Nusra is funded by Turkey, and the money, so that is a rat line, the money coming from the other side. And we are, I think, in the Indian Ocean region, we are looking at something like that. So there's a conflict zone being created right in our backyard. I mean, I've been told not to use the word backyard, but yes, I mean, this is an area which will, any conflict or any development in this region is going to directly affect us. So we have to take note of it. And so there is excessive military buildup. I mean, it's very funny to see that socio-economically, the nations in this region are really not developed. I mean, they cannot spend so much militarily. There are so many other competing socio-economic priorities politically, but we are spending a lot on military hardware. Now, if you look at the Indo-Pacific strategy or the strategic space, this is the entire region which is tropical. I mean, Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. And it is important for us to understand the underwater technology that developed during the Cold War period happened in the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap. And that is a very different area. I mean, to give you a very simplistic explanation, when we bought sonars and tested there, it gave you 32 nautical miles as the detection range. The same ship, the same hardware, comes to India, it gives you 5 to 6 nautical miles. So that is the level of degradation that we are talking about. It is nothing wrong with the hardware, it is the soft capability that we need to develop, and I don't think anybody can help us or anybody would help us. So just the rush to buy military hardware has to be complemented with these kind of efforts. And there are enough examples, this is doable, I mean, let me just simply put it like that. Now, so Indo-Pacific, when we are talking about Quad, to counter China, we must not forget the Indo part of it. The capacity building has to be kind of taken up in a manner that we are able to counter it effectively. Now, India has been, I mean, there has been a lot of rhetoric, if I may use the word, that India is being given a central role in the Indo-Pacific or whatever it may be. But what is our focus on our own internal capability? Now, this is all well known. China is trying to build a whole lot of assets and whole lot of activities are going on. But what is our look at our own capabilities? So, India in the 21st century. I'll give you a few examples, I think, which will take this into more context. Sagar Vision. I don't think I need to tell this community what the Sagar Vision is all about. This is, I think, the most important statement that we are seeing ourselves, not being seen, we are seeing ourselves as a regional power. And we also recognize the security concerns that are there and also the growth potential that is available to us. Now, going forward, have we really built up the capability that is required? I mean, so the UDA for Sagar is something we need to be very, very aware of. Now, this is one example. I mean, when I say acoustic capacity building, I would like to give you an example. 1988, we had the first Chakra, which was brought from Russia. And this platform, and this is very important. I mean, when we say nuclear powered with no first use, what is the credible second strike capability that we are talking about? It's obviously a nuclear submarine with the capability. Now, when Chakra, when it came in 1988, when this was deployed off Vizag, for a simple exercise of detecting the fleet, when it sat down in position, the entire sonar screen got blanked out. So obviously there was a little panic and there was a brainstorming, and as we call in the Navy, the Masab, who's a sailor but with a lot of experience, about 25 years of operational experience. Masab said, sir, blast transmission karenge theek ho jayega. And blast transmission for a submarine is suicidal. I mean, you are going to reveal your position. But the captain, obviously, he had seen enough in the US also before he took command. So he said, okay, he agreed, and And he wrote, after 8 years, he wrote that this is probably a snapping shrimp bed. Let me tell you, in the Americans, when they deployed nuclear submarine in 1952, Nautilus, in 1946, the Scripps Institute of Oceanography did a global survey of snapping shrimp bed. And nuclear submarines are not for your own waters, they are for waters beyond you. So they did a snapping shrimp. Imagine in 1946, what was the level of technology? So it just speaks about the vision that we are talking about. And the entire tropical region is a habitat of snapping shrimps. Each snapping shrimp produces a noise equivalent of 200 dB, reference 1 micropascal. The biggest whale or biggest mammal, blue whale, generates sound of the order of 196 dB, reference 1 micropascal. Whales are in 510 maximum. Snapping shrimps are in millions. So if your nuclear submarine is sitting on a snapping shrimp bed, what are we talking about? And this I wrote about 7 years back, or I think 8 years back, when I was still a serving naval officer. I dared to do that. And I've written, I just got a couple of calls that very good, well written, because it was with a lot of evidence. And what the Americans did, that entire thing is available in open literature. So, and even the blog which Admiral Ganeshan had written, all that has been put. But we have not woken up to these things. And today, I think this is very easily doable. The transducers and the entire hardware that they built is all available off the shelf. We can just pick it up, and it just requires something. And even what they did is available. So it is no big deal if we want to embark on this. It's a very simple thing, doable. We have huge assets. I mean, these are very high value assets. What about their underwater security? I mean, I won't go beyond this. I mean, I'll just leave it at that. Now, maritime capacity building, we are talking about Sagarmala project. A whole lot of things are being talked about. But what about the sustainability of it? What about so much maritime activity also has a lot of noise associated with it, and acoustic habitat degradation is something. Let us all understand the sound is the only signal that propagates underwater. So marine mammals also use sound to perceive the environment around them. They use sound for all the biologically critical functions. So if we ignore that, our growth path will not be sustainable. So we need to be aware of what we are doing. I mean, a simple thing, these strandings that have happened. This is a 40-feet blue whale that got stranded in May 2015. A 50-feet bride whale got stranded south of Mumbai, September 2016, and these are 90 pilotless whales that got stranded off Tuticorin. I have analyzed these two incidents, and I have attributed it to the anti-piracy operation that started in 2009. The entire shipping lane got shifted, and this created a complete disturbance to the migration pattern of these animals. And I've given with evidence, I've given with data. And this has been, and this is an international journal publication which has been accepted. So we need to be, even our policies need to be mindful of these aspects. It's all about acoustic capacity building, knowing what it is. And I think we are a responsible nation. Somebody talked about China getting cleaner. So I think these are things that we cannot ignore as we go forward. This was another very interesting thing. We have a military maritime strategy much before a comprehensive maritime strategy. So when I was in Singapore and I used to attend many of these think tank things, people say that, are you an aggressive nation which declares its military maritime strategy before its own comprehensive maritime strategy? And if my guess is correct, I think it was only in the Vajpayee regime that Navy got a big share of the defense budget. And that's when we started. Navy has to plan at least 25 years. It cannot be less than that, because our main thing is the ships. So from the time you conceive what is required to, it comes on the drawing board and the ship is constructed, it takes about 10 to 15 years. Then you operate it for a while, and then only you can understand the efficacy of it. So 25 years. So Navy actually went ahead and built up this whole plan, and it got seen as a military maritime strategy and got a lot of publicity, but I think we still lost out on the larger, and Navy, if you look at it, it's a small component of the larger maritime sector. So we need to be mindful of that. We will not get the support that is required to kind of even take it forward. Now let's look at China. Now, what is the geopolitics of UDA? Underwater domain awareness. Asia X. Towards the end of the Cold War, the Americans had started believing that there is nobody else who can challenge them. And towards the end of the century, the Americans got fooled because the Chinese had built a massive underwater capabilities in terms of having submarines and all that, and that gave them a shake-up that we need to. And in early 2000, they started what is called Asia X, because South China Sea is also tropical. And if the Americans have to operate there, they have to have a much greater understanding of the tropical littoral conditions. So they initiated this Asia X, which was led by University of Washington. I mean, they have been using academia in a very, very strategic way. In the first phase, it was University of Washington with 6 other universities, which actually planned the entire shallow water acoustics or tropical shallow water measurement exercise. It went on for 3 years. It was a massive exercise, which was, so after the first phase, they realized that it will become a more diplomatic issue. So they involved many local universities, Chinese, Taiwanese, Hong Kong, Singapore, everybody got involved in this. The takeaways for US was very clear that they needed military data of that region. They needed to know the entire bathymetry, entire acoustic propagation if they have to effectively deploy submarines in the tropical waters. Takeaway for China, I was in China in Shanghai in 2016 for the biggest oceans conference. I met many of them and I asked. They said it was very clear to us that such a thing, we cannot do it on our own. There is no option but for us to participate. They have participated and then learned a lot. And I want to draw your attention that when President Trump was elected and that 20 days period he has not taken over, China captured a US drone in South China Sea. Kept it for 3 days and returned it. The message was very clear because after Asia X, US has been routinely streaming underwater drones and acoustic arrays to collect data, and this was known. But now China is confident enough to tell the US that no more. You cannot continue with this. And you see what has happened after that. You can see that they have started controlling the region and not allowing the Americans to routinely collect data and build their acoustic capacity building. So I think I've talked about this. And we need to be very clear that when I was in Singapore, I was managing this global AUV competition which is held in Singapore. I was part of the whole team. And I realized that any underwater, autonomous underwater vehicle competition globally, Americans are part of it. They'll just come, they'll say the first prize or this much money we are going to be. And that is all Office of Naval Research being part of it, funded by them. So they have been coming there and they exactly know which team is coming from where and doing what. I would like to propose to the Navy and to the powers in India that we should also be holding, because underwater drones is going to be a biggest threat going forward. And this is a very simple way, which is not, there's no brainer that if we hold it here and invite countries, because the same people are going to be switching side, and whether you are part of the state or the non-state, we need to be talking about this. I think this is something serious we need to look at it. I mean, when we are investing so much on Sagar or Sagarmala or whatever, maritime infrastructure, one small drone attack. I mean, I've been in Tokyo University in the robotics department and also in Singapore. These are actually BTech projects. Youngsters, you must know. I mean, making a AUV is a BTech project being done there. And or an MTech project. I mean, it is a little more advanced, but making a small drone and making it work is a BTech project. And it's possible. I mean, it's nothing great. Now, talking about this, so going forward from Asia X, China did not stop there. It was only in 2015 they talked about this underwater Great Wall project. It reminds us of the Sochus and the Point Sur facility that the US has built during the Cold War. And I've written about this. I said that it is not by doing this project that China will attain complete control over the tropical littoral waters, but this is the vision. China has got now multiple acoustic institutes and a complete integrated vision and action. So when I went to Shanghai, I saw this entire, the entire Great Wall project is a very well thought out strategy going on for last 20, 25 years. And this is an underwater lab which is kind of working out, they're building up their acoustic capacity. What they have been able to achieve is not important, but it is the vision. Now, there are similar things like Acoustic Research Lab in NUS has got a whole lot of people, and 80% of it is Indians, but they are not contributing to our requirements. So we need to, my whole vision of setting up MRC in Pune was there are people from Pune working in these labs and wanting to come and contribute. So we just need a setup which can actually build this up in a more effective way. MS-370 is a very classic case we need to be aware of. This had almost 95% Chinese who went down in the aircraft. But the world community or the Western world gave the search and rescue to Australia. There's a lot of geopolitics behind this, and acoustic capacity building is part of it. There was a lot of invite, even to me personally, because I've been into this. They invited us to even participate in the search. But I don't think India had a vision, even not a single DRDO scientist or anybody working in acoustics went to participate. It was such a beautiful learning. In Oceans, Shanghai, the project leader of MS-370 came. And it was supposed to be, because he initially said, I am very busy, I have to go back. And it was a 1-hour session which was in a small room. But it turned out that it happened in the lobby and the entire conference got shut down and people wanted to listen to him. You can imagine a person who has done this for more than 4 years, what kind of experience he had. And when he started sharing it, everybody just stopped everything and they were there. It went on for 7 hours. The entire thing. And it is all about acoustic capacity building. Deploying various underwater assets and how data will be collected, how data was analyzed, and in very bad weathers. It's all about building that capability, and I think it was a fantastic opportunity for our young researchers also to have participated. There were a lot of people. I was in Tokyo when this incident happened, and we had so many invites coming. But there was absolutely no vision here. How do we become part of such a thing? So, now, challenges or opportunity going forward, if you look at the Indian Ocean region, we have socio-economic issues. Political instability, geopolitics is fragmented, so extra-regional powers are getting a free hand to do whatever they want. They are not letting us build, or we are not building our acoustic capacity building, and they are pushing hardware to us. It's a fantastic situation for them, but I think we need to look at it. And it obviously disturbs safe, secure, sustainable growth for everybody. The Kuznets curve is a very standard curve when we look at growth versus environmental degradation. You can see as the growth increases, you will have more and more degradation. But then you come at a point where, people start realizing, and we have regulations that kind of start controlling that. So I think in India, we are on the first dotted line, and it is time that we look at the environmental aspects and it is not that if we look at environment, our growth is going to get stunted or it is going to get affected. If we have an understanding and we can maneuver sustainability through whatever we want to do. So these binaries are a hallmark. Different agencies or different groups will not cooperate with each other, so there is always a lack of synergy. Now, underwater technology needs to be understood in the post-Cold War scenario. People have spoken about giving more to the military. But let me tell you, even in the US, after the Cold War, you look at the SOSUS facility had to be opened up. And when you open up, now if you look at the maritime domain awareness, it had remained an event-driven and a security-driven thing after 9/11 in US and 26/11 in India. But even in the US, people have commented that it has remained a surface thing, and there is a whole lot of underwater threats which are not yet addressed, even in the US, because it has remained a security-driven thing. Security-driven things always have a sense of exclusivity, and in the name of classified thing, we don't want more people to get involved. And similarly, it has happened in India. If you look at the assets that have been created, they're all surface, nothing to do with the underwater threats. Now, even in the US, after the social system had to be opened up, and we had cases where the system had to be, had started degrading. The second is the point source facility had to be shut down because there was not enough resources. Ship shock test, I think I will skip this. I will come to what is. UDA will have these 4 different stakeholders, and we are all in our own world, we don't cooperate with each other. There are issues of Chinese submarine. If your sonar gives you 32 becomes 5 nautical miles. For the same area, we have to deploy 8 times more assets. And if we can work on our own, develop certain capabilities, even if we can do this 5 to 10, we have reduced the asset deployment by half. And that will be a 4-time advantage because our adversary will not have that with us, with them. So this is something we need to focus on. Kasab came by a boat. He may not come next time by a boat. So we need to be careful about that. I mean, blue economic entities, energy security, food security. The global fish stock is on the decline since 1996. In India, and not just in India, in many parts of the world, the bycatch or the wastage during fishing is more than 80%. How do we regulate this? We need underwater technology, underwater domain awareness. So a whole lot of things. I mean, undersea mining is something important. Disaster management and acoustic habitat degradation or environmental aspects. We are seeing a lot of strandings even in our waters. And also that this is the Fukushima disaster. Our understanding of the ecosystem that exists is absolutely minimal. We have no idea of the ecosystem and the various components of the ecosystem, how they interact with each other. There's a lot of study that is required to first understand our own area. And now you cannot have a massive deployment of sensors in this such a big, I mean, we are talking about 20 lakh square kilometer of area. We have to have new technology, AI and deep learning and data science is something we need to look at when we want to develop these capabilities. So I think I'll quickly, this is my last slide. Now this is the framework that I'm proposing. The UDA framework as proposed by us in MRC this is what it is. If you look at the horizontal construct, different faces of the cube have different requirements, whether it is national security or blue economy or environment and disaster or science and technology, they will have their own requirement. But the core will remain acoustic capacity building. Unless we understand, we will not be able to do, we will keep on importing and it will not work for us. If you look at the vertical construct, we have to do a lot of sensing to understand our own conditions and then we attempt analysis more specific and then do the regulation. It's normally the other way. If you look at the cubes that are there, different cubes, even young students, when they are looking for career opportunities, they exactly know whatever project they know how it is relevant to which stakeholder, and there is a possibility that it may overlap with multiple stakeholders. So it is the capability that you develop and you move forward and create opportunities for. This is, I think, going to be the next big thing that we are going to look at in the future. The second part is even for the regulators, if I'm allowed to say so. We exactly know, if we look at India, there are multiple organizations doing a lot of overlapping things. I mean, if as a scientist or a person there, whatever I do, whatever I know, not bothering whether it is, so this actually framework gives you, if this part has been done, we color this and say this enough is done, now please find other regions. So this gives you a very structured way of kind of looking at effective underwater domain awareness. So I think so this is one last slide. If this is what we have done based on the AIS data that comes from, gives us complete understanding of the shipping traffic. We have built this map which gives us noise in the ocean. But now if you look at it, Navy can use this for deploying their submarines. We know exactly where you will get best detection ranges. Even for environmental people also, whether from policy or anybody, we can use this map to find out. So even for policy driving also, we can use this map. So many such studies can be done to kind of build up a national requirement. And this is for the underwater radiated noise. You see various stakeholders can actually contribute. And what UDA proposes is pooling of resources and synergizing of efforts. Everybody can come together, put resources and basically support research and development. That's all. Thank you.